Welcome back. You're watching NewsX and I'm Vaishali Kohli. Now, the India-EU FTA marks a significant new chapter in bilateral economic engagement and is expected to strengthen trade ties while accelerating cooperation in innovation, clean energy and advanced manufacturing. Against this backdrop, viewers, the Federation of European Business in India organized a special meet bringing together senior policy makers, diplomats and industry leaders to discuss the opportunities emerging from the agreement and the roadmap for its implementation. The event was graced by the chief guest, Shri Darpan Jain, Additional Secretary of the Department of Commerce of the Government of India, His Excellency Hervé Delphin, Ambassador of the European Union to India, who was also present. A key highlight of the event was the launch of a report on the footprint of European Union businesses in India, underlining the growing economic partnership between India and the EU. Let's take a look.
History was scripted when the India-European Union Free Trade Agreement was inked on January 27, 2026. It was hailed by Ursula von der Leyen as the mother of all deals, creating a 2 billion person trade zone, that is 25% of the world's population. It is designed to boost economic ties, enhance export competitiveness, and integrate Indian businesses into European value chains, thereby impacting 1/3 of global trade. The deal itself provides preferential access on 99% of Indian exports and 97% of European exports across key sectors like textiles, leather, gems, pharma, and aerospace. It is expected to create 0.8 million jobs. Now, with ratification pending, what remains to be seen is how both sides really translate the document into real business outcomes on the ground. And on that note, we are here at the Taj Mahal Hotel in New Delhi, where policymakers, diplomats and industry leaders have gathered for the Federation of European Business in India meet on decoding the EU-India Free Trade Agreement. The discussions today are focusing on market access, investment opportunities, supply chains, as well as the impact of this deal on businesses across sectors.
In its scope and scale, the EU-India FTA will directly touch the lives of 2 billion people, or in other words, 1/4 of the world's population and cover 1/4 of the global GDP. This is staggering. And it could not have come at a more pivotal time in history. The evolving global order is bringing India and Europe closer, based on shared values and commitment to democracy, a rule-based international order and multilateralism. The ties are multifaceted, covering a wide spectrum of topics, especially trade, technology, and security. It is a proud privilege for the Federation of European Businesses in India, FEBI, to be playing a sincere role in catalyzing the future growth in India. Future growth in trade and investment between Europe and India. In its short existence, FEBI has itself established as a credible advocate of a stronger, deeper, and wider India-EU relationship, not just in trade and investment, but also as a social ambassador that highlights the best of Europe in India and the best of India in Europe. Mr. Secretary, at FEBI, we have done an EU-India FTA dividend study. The findings are overwhelmingly encouraging. About 90% of the EU businesses increasingly see India as a key driver of overall growth, a key driver. More than 95%, this is close to 100, of EU companies plan to expand operations in India in the next 5 years. Emerging areas of collaboration for FEBI member companies: manufacturing and supply chain, 75%, technology and digital innovation, 42%, research and development and talent development, 51%. If I may speak from experience, rationalized tariff regimes can be a great enabler of investment. An ambitious, balanced free trade agreement can transform individual success stories into a systemic engine for mutual wealth and opportunity. It is the key to de-risking our supply chains and ensuring that the next decade of investment betters the last. Ambassador, Secretary, the business community is ready. FEBI is ready. Let us secure this landmark FTA and in doing so, secure the shared future of the EU and India. Thank you very much.
Today is also an ominous moment because we are exactly 100 days after the summit, EU-India summit. So I wanted really to thank FEBI on hosting today's event on such a symbolic, at such a symbolic juncture. You know, it's also a moment where 100 days, it's usually the moment where you measure success. And I think today is really about getting a sense of elation, of achievement, but it's also a time to look ahead and reflect on what still needs to be done to capitalize on this achievement. And that will be also part of my talking today. So now, after some what would describe as 2 decades of negotiation, we have now a good deal, a substantial deal that hopefully would stay with us for many more decades. And as was mentioned by Jürgen Westermeier, this will be indeed a free trade zone covering 2 billion people, a quarter of the global population, and a quarter of the global GDP. And so it will connect the world's largest single market with the fastest growing major economy. And so it will be also the largest FTA signed by either side. And that's the reason why I think President von der Leyen was so right in calling it the mother of all deals. And importantly, it was not any deal or deal at any cost. We wanted on both sides to make it comprehensive, balanced, commercially meaningful. And I think this is what we achieved if you look at the structure of the FTA in the wide range of trade disciplines from core market access areas such as trade in goods and services, intellectual property, digital trade or dispute settlements, among others. And it is balanced as it provides for similar level of concessions and respects of both sides' sensitivities. And we have been many times asked about so-called red lines on both sides, but I think there was political wisdom, let's be honest about that, early in the negotiation to define what were the sort of red lines and not lose time or dig hills in trying to move the red lines. So today, our bilateral trade in goods and services stand at over 190 billion. But be clear that with this FTA, it will receive a major boost. And it is not just fantasy of mine to believe so. We have documented evidence that for every single FTA that the EU has had, the trade has grown twice faster than with partners with non-FTA. So we are confident that this is also will happen with India. And think of it, it is estimated that EU's good exports to India will double by 2032, and with preferential access to the EU market, Indian companies will be well positioned to significantly increase their sales to the EU. So that will bring clearly our trade to a totally new level. But the FTA is not only about numbers, it's also about tangible benefits for businesses and people. And more trade means more jobs and more investment. And this is today's opportunity for us to share the release and announce the launch of this EU economic footprint study that updated the data we had so far, but we wanted to take a comprehensive look at it. What is the EU economic footprint in India? It's over 6,000 European firms, and I'm pretty sure this number will grow over time, currently providing more than 3.7 million direct jobs and many more indirect jobs. And all the details of the findings of this study will be presented today. And on the other side, you have 1,500 Indian companies. I stand to be corrected by DARPA. I'm sure there may be more, but at least that's what we have as data, and they are also contributing to the European growth story. So it is estimated that the EU-India trade will generate 0.8 million additional jobs. And as Jürgen mentioned, through the business sentiment survey done by FEBI, we see a lot of enthusiasm and interest from the European business community to do more here in India. And trade stimulates investment. EU is already a leading investor in India with an FDI stock of over 140 billion euros. And the stock of Indian investment in Europe stands at 440 billion euros. So the opportunities arising from the FTAs are pretty clear. And now the challenge is to turn these opportunities into achievements. And the legal provisions of the FTA must be translated into concrete business deals. Finally, the FTA is not just a game changer for boosting trade. It is, and it was mentioned also by Jürgen, it is a catalyst for the closer integration of our economies and our ecosystems. We should not, as I like to describe the FTA like the big tree that should not hide but stand in front of the big forest. And the big forest is the joint EU-India comprehensive strategic agenda that has been agreed at the summit last January. The EU and India have followed similar strategic moves of building a dense network of advanced FTA, which will develop as a lace of prosperity and economic stability. And this in itself is also a major common good. So for now, let's celebrate the conclusion of the negotiations of the EU-India FTA, and clearly let's get back to the work so it becomes the agent of change it is designed to be. Thank you very much for your attention.
So 10 takeaways, not many, 10 takeaways. So the first one I think is already captured. So can we go to the first slide? Yeah. So this is the scale part of it. As we have heard, it's why it is mother of all deals. So if you see the numbers themselves convey 2 billion people, it touches 2 billion people, it covers 25 trillion. So if you see the GDPs I have given on the top, so 24 trillion, 25 trillion you can say. Global GDP is 100 trillion, so almost 1/4 of global GDP it covers. If we see trade, if you see trade numbers, merchandise and services together, around 6.9 is EU's export, 6.6 is import, and then services also if you cover. So almost 1/3 of global trade is covered by this agreement. India and EU are very complementary in nature. I think that is something which one needs to understand. We are not competitive. You're not producing labor-intensive textile products. So I don't have an issue in opening my market to you. And the same is true for my products going to EU market. So EU products, medical devices, high-tech medical devices coming from EU, or premium wines, or auto, which is in the premium category. I think those are all complementary products. In our trade profile itself, there is a lot of match. So we need not worry about India's exports to EU and EU's exports to India. Both of them will help our consumers, will make our industry more productive, will also enhance our growth. This EU and India FTA is not only between us. It opens, unlocks markets in other countries as well, because both of us have large number of trade agreements. And you would have read about India. India has entered into 9 FTAs in past 5 years. So it's a big network of FTAs, which European businesses would also kind of can leverage. So when we are doing any trade between India and EU. So EU goods can come to India, and from India they can enjoy duty-free access to all these markets. And mind you, all these markets, we have best of concessions. So again, EU also has a very, very strong network of trade agreements. More than 40 agreements with 72 countries, most of the countries covered. So some of them under ratification, some of them negotiations, some of them already done. So the short point I'm trying to make here is India now, I mean with the FTAs which I displayed, we are covering almost 3/4 of our exports. So 3/4 of India's exports now enjoy zero duty concession in foreign markets, best terms of treatment for its services, for its goods, and I imagine the same would be the situation for EU. Now this one I want to just give you a peep into coverage of goods. So tariffs. Tariffs are the biggest thing which we actually bring down when we enter into a trade agreement. And as was being pointed out, so 99.5% of the TV is actually trade value is getting covered. 96% of tariff lines are getting covered. So that is what India's exports will actually enjoy in EU market. And if you see EU's exports to India, 97.5%. Again, trade value is covered in that. Services, as I was saying, is a very important area. Again, in terms of coverage, I think we have covered the entire universe of services. So when I say entire universe, so all services, trade is covered in that, all sectors are covered, ability to provide services, getting access, mobility, a very, very important component of services in which businesses have to deploy people to provide services, whether they are intra-corporate transferees, whether they are contractual service suppliers, whether they are independent professionals, they have been covered. Now, this is on the rules, as I was saying. So there are accompanying rules which ensure that flow of these goods, flow of these services is smooth, unhindered, facilitative, transparent, without leading to any burdensome procedures. So there are disciplines around that. The most important one being the certificate of origin, to ensure that the goods which are produced only in, substantially produced, I should not say only produced in India and EU, substantially produced in India and EU. So there is a requirement of substantial transformation to take place. So it has been done in a very, very balanced manner. Digital trade, as I was telling, would again ensure that we get into paperless trading, we get into e-contracts, we get into consumer protection. So number of provisions are there which facilitate digital trade also. We have also addressed many, many challenging issues in the FTA. It is not that we have skirted issues which were most challenging. You would have read in the run-up to the negotiations that CBAM is an issue and how do we kind of handle that. So we have handled that issue through a partnership approach, through an approach in which we both understand each other's perspective and go in a forward direction. This is a living agreement. All issues cannot be sorted in one go. And things are going to evolve. Trade is very dynamic. So new challenges will keep coming, new issues will keep arising. We need to have provisions in the agreement to deal with those issues. So we have embedded many such provisions to regularly review, to consult, to resolve. And the whole mechanism is built on trust, the whole mechanism is built on cooperation, the whole mechanism is built on higher level engagement. As they say, the ship is built, now you have to sail it. I mean, we can only prepare a framework. Government can only take obligations on its measures, on its policies. Government cannot make businesses sell or trade with each other. So I think ultimately the utilization of this FTA, the success of this FTA is in the hands of all of you. I hope we are able to realize the potential which is there, untapped, in the relationship between India and EU. Thank you so much.
We're being joined by Ms. Sonia Parashar, Secretary General of FEBI. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, after this landmark deal was inked on the 27th of January, what's been the thrust behind this, and what's really prompted EU to engage deeper with the economic sector in India?
It is not something which has evolved only for the last 5 years or 20 years when we've been negotiating. The fact that 6,000 EU businesses are already active in India, which means they believe in the Indian market. And this FTA is only going to boost the confidence of the current investors to reinvest. And also India today is being seen as a very strategic, important market. And that is a reason it was very important, it was very pertinent that both EU and India come closer. They so-called, it's almost sounding like, renewing your marriage vows, because the fact is not that these companies were, not present. They've been here. And we really wish and hope that with this FTA, which has been concluded and should be signed soon, should come entry into force also by maybe mid of 2027 or end of 2027. And with this, we hope that there are more companies who are sitting on the fence with this FTA being in place, would look at India with a little bit of more confidence and would like to come and enter the market.
Indeed, and to add to that, since you mentioned the statistics, 6,000 EU companies are in India, according to the study that was just published. I also happened to see that it was about a 1.5 time increase over the last decade. How optimistic are you of this pace now surging even further once the India-EU FTA is ratified?
What I understand is that this number, actually in China, we have almost 3 times the number of EU businesses, which means there's a lot to catch up. And also with the fact that India is growing at a pace which everybody is watching, with 1.46 billion people, with the opportunities, the market potential, these companies will definitely, reinvest in this market, but also new companies will enter. So which means from 6,000, my only hope is that in the next 2 to 3 years, with this FTA entry into force, wouldn't it be an exciting news that we have another 1,000 companies, if not 2,000, coming and establishing their offices in India to work with India for India.
We're being joined by Mr. Hardeep Singh Brar, CEO of BMW. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time and speaking to us. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, what are your expectations of the FTA being translated into action? How will it impact the automobile sector at large?
I think you would have heard His Excellency, European Ambassador to India today. He spoke about that the scrubbing is still going on. They will go to the 24 or 27 countries in EU, and that's when the action will start. I think the expectation from today's discussion is that it will come into force by end of 27 or beginning of 2028. That's when the real action starts. Of course, there's a rationalization of taxes on both the sides, and with the rationalization of prices, I think the demand will definitely increase. We've already seen after the GST rationalization how the demand has gone up. And I think a lot of imported, for example, imported cars, some of the cars, we have 5% of our cars which are fully built units, where the tax is around 110%. Now imagine when it comes down to 40%, it will give a good boost. And some of the cars which we are not able to import today because the prices are very high, I think those benefits, once they are passed on, will be a great story. So really looking forward to that. But it's still a year and a half to 2 years away.
Absolutely. And speaking of your company, BMW, what are your expectations once this really, the promises really sort of morph into actionables on the ground once the ratification is done?
So as I said, the prices for the fully built units today, while 95% of our manufacturing happens in India, but those 5% products which we are getting through fully built units will get rationalized, and hence we are looking at price reduction on those from starting 2028.
All right, so we've also seen India ink about 9 FTAs over the last 6 years. What do you make of the Indian government's approach? Do you think the Indian government has managed to be very flexible, very confident, but also at the same time keeping national interests first by drawing our red lines?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I think you need to be confident. I think that shows the confidence of the customer, of the government, that what we can make in India, nobody can beat that. I think our economies of scale, the kind of pricing we have, let's say the automotive sector, nobody is able to really match those prices. So you have to be confident about yourself that these FTAs will not really flood products from outside, but rather you have the confidence that my products can really flood the global markets, and that comes from the point where you have a lot of confidence in your own manufacturing and your own services for the global market.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to us on NewsX.
अगर आप नहीं रहे तो ना ये सैलरी रहेगी